of meeting with and making other cultures. Um, if I was writing a dystopian novel, it would be pretty much like it is now. Um, the stories aren't the stories that you read in blogs aren't necessarily um, service oriented in that they tell you precisely how to go or what to do. They tell you about what I, the writer, did. And generally, advice I was given early on is that people don't care about your trip, they want to hear about their trip. And unfortunately, a lot of what we're reading is my trip. I just can't believe that people would. You page through these things for information nowadays, and that's about it. There isn't such a thing as reading pleasure in the vast world of travel writing today.
Thanks, Tim. It's 2025. Katie, tell me what writing and outdoor writing looks like.
Absolutely. So I think that there's going to be more of an emphasis, less on kind of far-flung destinations, because I think in 2025, uh, um, flying will be extremely prohibitively expensive, and we'll have a lot of guilt about what it's doing to the climate. So it's going to be more about road tripping. It's going to be more about electric road tripping, and more about kind of quirky local and regional adventures that people can have. I think it's going to be kind of in line with Tim's dystopic vision. It's going to be in some senses more digital. I think that the traditional service-oriented glossy magazine is going to diminish further. And I think according to some market research that we've done at Sierra, there are going to be kind of more sort of beautiful literary quarterly type journals. So in some sense, it'll go both more long form, but also in the digital world, it's going to be shorter. It's going to be more video oriented. There's going to be, in terms of outdoor writing, there's going to be more of an emphasis on accessibility and non-traditional adventurers and non-traditional adventure. We're living in the world right now where some of the biggest names in adventure journalism are like Patagonia, the Instagram's drag star who backpacks, and Unlikely Hikers, which is a group of non-traditional overweight hikers that are kind of making a big dent on the internet right now. And I think that it's going to be about more social travel, groups of people kind of coming together in the outdoors, and being more communal about their adventure. And I think it's the economy is going to change drastically. So it's going to be about traveling in the sharing economy, and traveling, how to kind of like create more of a commune in terms of creating your adventures and your vacations. But at the same time, it's going to be interesting to see how we still are writing about traveling and adventuring in the epoch of social distancing, and as germaphobes. I think it's going to be, the future of travel is, we don't really know what it's going to look like yet. And so at this point, I'm kind of really intrigued by stories that sort of envision that future and play with that future, and sort of reimagine that sphere.
Katie, should our members bother writing pitch letters to newspapers, or is newspapers something only old people remember 5 years from now?
I think newspapers with good online presences, will persevere. People do still like holding things and reading things, but at the same time, I think it's kind of about what's going to be digital friendly and Instagram friendly, and hashtag friendly, unfortunately, or for better or for worse.
Thanks. Okay, Tim Cahill, you wrote a cheery book on Yellowstone, and also wrote something called Buried Dreams Inside the Mind of a Serial Killer. It's a horrifying tale told through the voice of a multiple murderer, a real one. So Pleasant Walks and Murder Most Foul. That, sir, is a broad range. So let's talk about breadth versus narrow focus for writers. Tim.
Um, well, frankly, what happened with that book is that I might have been, that was published in '84. I think I might have been ahead of the serial killer curve a little bit, but uh, it it was a bestseller, and it allowed me to publish the books that I ended up spending the rest of my career writing. That was Outdoor Adventure. Listen, I lived inside the sewer of this guy's mind for 3 years.
Whoa.
And when I got out, I never wanted to go back to a place like that. And believe me, every whack job that came down the pike from Jeffrey Dahmer on, they wanted me to write that book. And I said, no, I'm going to write about trees and stuff. So the had I spent the rest of my career writing about serial killers, I don't believe I'd be here right now. I don't think it would have been psychologically healthy for me. I mean, I was really in the mind of that person. So having depth, I don't know. It's being able to tell a story and having the story be able to affect you. I would prefer the stories that affect me to be something that I enjoy doing or enjoy finding out about, even if they happen to, it might be a climate story, it might be something else, but I'm not inside that sewer anymore. So the, the depth is really just a matter of um, a choice on my part to do one thing rather than another. I'd be richer now, but I would be a way sicker human being.
You went deep and came up dirty. There's no doubt about it. It was
Yeah,
truly horrifying to even read today.
but it is. And if for some reason, it's the 40th anniversary of something that he did, either getting executed or being convicted or something. I've done 2 or 3 uh, television shows about him, and that was. I mean, I had to read the damn book again, and I'm proud of it. I did a good job on it, but uh, I'm glad I don't do that for a living.
Got it. Katie O'Reilly, Sierra has covered everything from palm oil to cool schools to my favorite, Steal a Bike Week for Thieves. And recently, the magazine did Birding While Black. So you've covered a broad swath too. As an editor, talking to prospective writers here today, what are your thoughts about depth and breadth?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, I really love to dive deep on topics if a writer can hang it on a really, really good story. And you know, so much of what we do at Sierra is inherently pretty depressing. So it's I think it becomes that much more important to just have a really compelling story to be able to hang that narrative on, to you know, show us some alarming information about like green death and green burial, about you know extreme measures that people are going to avoid palm oil, to you know how reimagining a world where you know bikes are the primary mode of transportation, and bike thieves are like public enemy number one. So I tend to I think you know there's a lot. I think people are hungrier to dive deeper right now and really kind of nerd out on certain topics. I think that we're at a point in culture where everyone has kind of taken, everyone kind of has a DIY degree in environmental studies at this point. And, I no longer pay attention to pitches that are kind of like, oh, reusable bags are very important. Like here's why we should compost. Like we all know that. It's time to kind of like dive into the nitpicky, the science and the culture behind it. Like I want to read essays on, food sovereignty and how we can achieve it. And how people can like complete zero waste camping. How did you pull that off? I think in terms of environmental reporting, I think that Sierra is at a point where we're a little bit more into diving deep. Does that answer the question?
It does indeed, which leads me to my next question to you, because I want to quote a portion of a sentence you wrote about palm oil. Palm oil, says Katie. Palm oil has dozens of ingredient list aliases: vegetable oil, palmate, cocoa butter equivalent, sodium lauryl sulfate, and glycerol stearate, to name a few. So let's talk about writers and research. What can you advise the people here today?
Ooh, I think that the environmental topics are something that any it's kind of the existential quandary of our time right now is climate change and how we reckon with it, and how we live in this environment. And I feel like a lot of writers kind of shy away from it a little bit and think, oh, I don't have an ecology degree. I'm not a climate scientist. But these are issues that affect all aspects of our lives. If you love writing about food and travel, there's a ton there right now. I mean, some of our most popular stories lately have been about pandemic gardening and about how to safely socially distance in the great outdoors and still hike and bike and beach and road trip. And if you love writing about art and culture, I mean, there's a really cool eco hip hop movement underway, and I think there are some really great questions to be posed about, what is the role of activist art and what does it play? And if you love writing about technology, there are all sorts of really interesting solutions and apps out there for addressing major systemic problems like food waste and also just living a greener lifestyle. So I think that if you're really, you just follow that curiosity, read a story that you'd like to write about and that you can really, we're into people who can nerd out on, kind of wonky niche topics, and make it fun and accessible.
So once you've got your subject that's right for you, what you're advising the people here today is go deep and find out lots. And I like your phrase, nerd out.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Tim, what about you in research? I know you've done plenty of it.
Yeah, I do plenty of it, and I advise people who want to work on a story to take copious notes. Take lots and lots of notes. Have a reporter's notebook. You are not always going to be able to type it out on your phone or on your computer. You have a reporter's notebook and you take copious notes. Meanwhile, say you're going to some country, it's you read what's recently been written about that particular country, and read what's classically written about it, because there's things that happen repeatedly and they've been covered. Maybe you don't want to cover that particular thing, but you want to know that it happens. I also have found that when you arrive at an airport in, say, Denpasar and Bali, you can go through the airport book section, and you will find some books in English about the country that are written by expats who have lived there a long time that are not available on Amazon, not available here, not available there. And those things are somewhere where you can get your best things. So, I mean, I try to do a lot of research before I go someplace, but uh, I find that I do a lot of research when I'm there. I mean, traveling and adventure traveling sounds like a lot of fun, like you're always on the go. No, no, no. You've got to wait 3 days to get the visa from this recalcitrant bureaucrat. And what are you going to do? You do your research. I find that that's a valuable thing. So, yeah, research. And then here's a simple thing. You need to, this is what Katie said. You got to hang it on a story. It's got to be a story. You've got to find the story. The story is what makes us want to read. It's the one thing that makes us remember things. The story walks out all the competing ideas, and you must focus on being able to tell that story. That story is like a lens. That's a lens through which we see the world, and we learn from the story. And I see many times that many writers, in the late lamented Traveler, I would see it quite often. Somebody was sent to, say, Ecuador. And what they found out was there's beaches. Quito can be quite a sophisticated town. There's mountains, there's jungle, there's desert. And so what's the title of the story? Because of the story in the magazine, because they couldn't find a story to write about. It's Ecuador, land of contrasts. That's and the other person that couldn't find the story would do, this place is spiritual to me. And every time I read that, unless they can convince me that it was really spiritual, I'll say, here's a writer who couldn't find the story. And how do you find the story? You look at all the things that's happening all around you, and I tell you this as writers, pick the thing you know you can write the hell out of. That's how to find the story.
I want to add something to this research talk. I think I love research. I hate letting the strings show that you've done your research. You know what I mean? So I read
don't be encyclopedic.
Set in London in the 19th century, and they identify as they're riding down the street in horse-drawn. Yeah, okay, don't tell me where the Bank of England is one more time. I know where it is. I don't care where it is. Don't let the strings show.
Right.
All right, let me ask you guys. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
But it's simple. Don't let them see you sweat.
Yes, that'll do it.
Don't let them see you sweat. And what you do is, yes, we are writers. We have something that the Germans have a word for. It's called the school teacher mentality. We've learned something and we want to impart it to other people, but we need to not do it in an encyclopedic way. Therefore, if you write carefully, you'll be writing along and you'll say, now here's where my reader is going to ask the question, why does that happen? And I can do 2 paragraphs of research explanation and then boom, back into the story. And then when they're starting to ask the question again, you can do a little bit more. It's People will say when they read my stories, well, they're just so easy. They just come up. Well, I'm not letting you see me sweat. But if you saw me writing, you saw me kicking my desk and I tore all my hair out.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to now ask the hard questions.
Okay.
I want you to both put modesty aside. What is the single biggest factor in your own success? And Katie, you get to go first.
Well, as an editor, I think that I have a strong instinct for reading a pitch and knowing that this writer has such a drive to write this story, which is the telltale sign that there is a story there, and it's in them, and they need to give birth to it, and they are the person to do it. You know, I don't respond well to pitches that are kind of like, I have five ideas. And here are some or like the ones that are like, here's a topic and I kind of want to broadly write about it. I know something about it. Do you need anything on this? I need to sense excitement. There's this story in me. I need to tell it. And I think, as an editor, if you have that excitement, you can convey it to me to the point that I want to get on the phone with you and talk about that story. I definitely, I spend the time to talk, to bounce ideas with writers, to brainstorm. I enjoy that part of it. It takes time. Not everyone on staff at my magazine does that. But I think it really pays off in the end to kind of have that connection and have that really strong working relationship. So that's something I really invest in as an editor. And I think when it's a situation like that and I can tell someone has a strong vision, I kind of let them get weird with it. I love when stories take unorthodox forms, and there are definitely moments where, I'm not the person in charge at my magazine, and I think, oh boy, I might have some explaining to do once I route this around to all the other editors. But I think I can make a strong case for, why this is entirely in first person, or it's not in first person at all, or it's kind of all over the place and poetic, or it's not. If I can really trust the writer's drive to tell this specific story and not just say, oh, I went to this place and there was an endangered rainforest there, and I know you're an environmental magazine, and so I want to write about like why we need to save the rainforest. Like that doesn't cut it. So yeah, and as a writer, I think that whatever middling success I have, I would kind of chalk up to vulnerability. I'm not afraid at all to write stories about what things going terribly wrong. I think some of the stories I've enjoyed that have been most successful for me are kind of like writing about backpacking the Lost Coast with my dog, which turned out to be a terrible idea. And like falling off of a mountain during a trail run, and having sort of an epiphany over whether or not to have children in the age of climate change. I think as a writer, I love when writers are willing to kind of show their ass and just be brutally honest about something that went wrong or something that they learned while traveling, or show their ignorance and their transformation. So those are the kind of stories that really appeal to me.
Terrific.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, what is the biggest single factor in your success?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to tell a story. I mean, Katie and I are on the same page. But let me tell you, I started back in 1965, and travel writing was 1975. And travel writing, for the most part, was very service oriented. And it was, I recall being nominated for various travel writing prizes, but being shunted aside because I didn't tell you which airline to take, which hotel to go to, and how to get your bags off the carousel. I told the story, and it wasn't that I figured that out myself. It was that I thought in my early writing career, I was going to be a great American novelist, and I learned fiction, and I learned how to carpet together a scene, how to use dialogue, how to make people feel, um, and how you make them feel is a story, not through an argumentative essay. And so I told stories at the beginning. Um, and that set me apart from a lot of other writers doing the same kinds of things. So yes, the as I say, Katie and I are on the same page. We are talking about stories that excite you, that get your heart going, stuff that you know you can write the hell out of. Yes, those are stories.
Thank you. Now I want you to both put politeness aside. What is the single biggest mistake you see writers making? Tim, why don't you start this one?
Um, well, clearly not finding the story. That person that went to Ecuador and found mountains and deserts and sophisticated cities and Quechua women and in small rural towns and could not put it together, made it Ecuador land of contrast. But let's contrast that with the writer Tom Miller, who wrote a book called The Panama Hat Trail. Panama hats actually start in Ecuador, and he followed the making of a Panama hat, and it makes a wonderful story. He talks with the Quechua women. He gives you uh, uh, the what the town is like, what the rural place is like, where it goes, who those people are, and he follows them right through. He found the story. I think that I have trouble with a lot of adventure stories because they're what I call phony epiphanies happening all over the place. When I finally summited the mountain and I saw the white world spread out for an infinity below me, it was then that I knew that I could finally forgive my brother. Oh, hell no, you didn't think that at all. I've climbed mountains. I know what it's like on the top. You're glad to get there, and you go down and you say, you know, half the danger is still in front of me. And if you ever do have an epiphany, it's going to be um, down below, lying on a bed in some little room with a ceiling fan going on and dust motes there, and you may be able to think about it, and you may have yeah, so unbelievable epiphanies are another
Very nice.
aspect of adventure writing I find distasteful.
Thank you. Katie, you are in a perfect position to answer this question.
It's funny, before Tim mentioned that, I was going to say that, you know, I had a spiritual awakening, and an Ecuador pet peeve is I went into nature and I had strong feelings that led to an epiphany moment. And it's not that that doesn't happen. But I think I think the biggest mistake writers make is trying to shoehorn something into those models, or trying to kind of seize on the current moment, and shoehorn and a story they have into that. Like, I've gotten so many pitches lately about kind of you know, the pandemic and sheltering in place forced me to conquer my agoraphobia by going for walks in the woods because I needed to get away from the house. Or, you know, it forced me to realize nature is all powerful because I connected with the tree in the backyard. And I'm, you know, not saying that there's nothing there, but there's just quite a bit of kind of trying to you know, seize on the zeitgeist. And I, at the same time, you know, I'm getting a ton of pitches right now that are kind of like, you know, we did stories about birding while Black, and how that can be so complicated. But you know, I'm being flooded with pitches about kind of like, oh, let's talk to Indigenous chefs. Let's talk to Black adventurers and see what got them to where they are. And I see what you're trying to do, but you can't just check a box. Like it's got to be that story. The story has to be there, is what I'm saying. And so I get a lot of pitches that are, saying this is trending. People want stories about this zeitgeisty topic, or this something about that's currently happening, and just trying to shoehorn in something that I don't believe they can pull off in a believable way. And one of my favorite stories I ever edited was about someone who was climbing Kilimanjaro because she was at a crossroads in her life and really wanted to have an epiphany, and had been consuming travel writing her whole life, and was kind of like, oh, I just summit this mountain and I'll have the answer, and it didn't happen at all. And she's totally, it's like, I love stories like that a lot more.
This has been deep, researchy, nerdy, and excellent. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Alec now for questions from the gang here. And if there's time at the end, I'll ask you each one more question. Thank you both so much, and get ready for questions from BATW.
Hi, we're tag teaming you, but I just want to thank you both for coming, and we have a few members of Tim's workshop who've joined us, and I know I speak for all of them saying how much we all benefited. It was in such a small room that if it happened now, we'd all have COVID. But anyway,
That's why we're not doing it this year.
Well, I'm sad about that because it's a really nice community there. But in any case, I've got, oh my gosh, here's a question from Jim Gebby. If you have questions, please type them into chat or just put up your hand and I'll recognize you, I hope. So this is from Jim, and Aaron, your question is after that. The last time I saw you was at the Cannibals Cave on Easter Island in 2006. I don't know whether this is Katie or Tim. Thanks for sharing your insights with us today. BATW is putting together an anthology of members' most unforgettable travel. I'm sure you've had many, but while you're sheltering in place, are there any? It's a hard question, but what trips are you guys thinking of that you maybe have some stories of? Or I often find I feel like I don't have the story towards the end of the trip, and I'm panicking a little bit. And but you two, are there trips that are on your mind? Maybe starting with you, Tim.
No, let me answer one of the things that you just mentioned here. You don't feel you have the story. That's happened to me on more than one occasion, but I've got those notes. And what I do is I go through those notes and I read those notes assiduously before I go to sleep for a couple of nights. So I almost have them memorized. And what happens is there is a story there. You can find them. You cannot find them if you didn't take copious notes. And so even if you didn't find the story while you're there, it's in your notes somewhere. So you can find it. And then what was the second part? Oh, yeah.
A memorable trip of yours that you've been thinking of.
I was thinking of this trip, and I was thinking about how travel writing has changed to the kind of stuff that I did, remote places. I recall going to this place in Peru called Huelapi. It's a ruins in the northern part of Peru, on the other side of the Andes, in what's called the Sierra del Selva, the eyebrow of the jungle. And we did like Hiram Bingham did in 1911, just ask people where the ruins are. And somebody showed us where the ruins were, and we went up there and camped there. And as we went up there and the guy was showing us, we were taking notes and drawing maps so that we could go back there. Huelape. It was a huge curvilinear brick complex that was immense, 14 acres I find now. uh, with little tiny doors that only a single person could come through. It must have been uh, some kind of fortress there. And about the second day we were up there, a police officer came up there um, and said we had to come down. He felt that we were probably vaqueros, grave robbers, bone robbers. And
Sure.
so we came down and we were questioned for 2 days by the Peruvian investigative police,
Gosh.
who really wanted to know why the hell we wanted to go up there, and why we were taking maps, because we're speaking about Ecuador a lot. The Peruvians up in that area of the country don't like Ecuadorians very much. There's a little shooting war that they have every January to commemorate their dislike for one another. So, well, were we with the Ecuadorians? Why were we up there? Boom. I decided, let's go see what Huaylape looks like, if they even have it. Oh yeah, they have it. They have now. They realize that a lot of people like myself would like to come and see it. That there's an entrance fee. There's they've hooray for Peru. They've preserved the site in its entirety. There's as I recall, it was a pretty hard walk up there. There's what do you call them? The chairlift that goes up.
Gondola, chairlift, yeah.
Yeah, there's a chairlift. You can't see it from the place. You got to walk to it. But and there's an entrance fee, and a group of archaeologists did a job on the place in 2007, and they've got a lot of information on it. And to me, that was just I wonder what travel would be like for me now if I was a younger person and wanted to go see something that the archaeologists hadn't seen yet, and it would be different. Anyway, that's what I've been thinking about.
So thank you. Well, I guess the moral quandary sometimes about writing about something for a popular outlet, you know it'll change a bit, but and what a time and place to have seen at that point. 2 days in custody is quite a long time, but anyway. Thank you. And Katie, what kinds of travel are you thinking of these days? I mean, it's a bit like choosing your favorite child, but are there some trips where you got or didn't get the story, or trips that are coming to you while we're all shut in?
Gosh, I've just found myself just being I've been just craving national parks adventures so badly over the past few months. And this past weekend I actually got to go to Sequoia for the first time. And I was tagging along with an astrophotographer, so we were staying in the park till 3-4 in the morning when no one's
Wow.
and encountering black bears and freezing, like going inside the trees to stay warm, and to take pictures. It's Milky Way season right now, to take landscape astro shots with the Milky Way. So
Wow.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
I hope that the black bear encounters weren't too close, but
they were very peaceful.
I guess
a little alarming when in the pitch dark, for sure.
Fair enough. Well, Aaron, one of our members who writes a lot of outdoor-related stuff, has asked, are you thinking readers are currently more interested in being armchair travelers, or really looking to get back out into nature as you did last weekend? Do you guys, Katie, do you see the, of course, National Geographic has been running all these pieces about the greatest travel books ever and so forth, but do you see it shifting from armchair travel towards actual travel again, or?
Yes, I think people are just so hungry to get out there. And I was doing just some casual research earlier today on it's like impossible to rent a camper van right now. It's, you know, whatever's possible, people are just hungry to do, and the parks are open at limited capacity, and you know, none of the you can't camp in most of them. The facilities aren't open, but people are just still just kind of like, there are so many message boards that are just kind of like, when can I get to Zion? When can I get to Yosemite? So I think people are ready to pour out there, and that, you know, stories about how to do so safely,
Mhm.
you know, and also kind of, you know, how to bootleg it and find loopholes to make it happen, are big right now.
Got it. Both of you, this is from another member who's obviously read some of your some of both of your works. They say you both get good stuff out of your interviews. How do you build trust with people, and how do you get them to open up to you? You know, in places where there's sometimes huge cultural differences, or any tricks of the trade, or is it more challenging than? Anyway, interviewing. Tim, go.
All right. Um, well, one thing you can do is ask them questions that you are truly interested in them doing, and when they answer you, this is a universal human trait. When they answer you, you answer them with a brief story about your own life and what happened that was similar. And they will answer with another story. And once again, we're talking about the primacy of stories. You tell stories to each other, and that's my interview technique.
Thank you. You put yourself, tell stories back and forth, and yeah.
I would agree
Well,
with that 100%, and you know, show some vulnerability there too. You know, say, and I think, you know, doing a ton of research, but not necessarily letting all your schoolwork show, is a huge part of a successful interview.
I'd like to throw one in here too.
Mhm.
If you have a list of questions, which you probably do, forget the list at the point where you should be following up on what the person last said. In other words, you really have to listen.
Yes, I think the questions you come up with are a rough guideline, because it's not an interview, it's a conversation, and so
Yep.
see where it leads.
And and also, I'm going back to my notes. Everybody does it differently, but tape recorder, I've done tape recorder interviews, and I listen to myself and I do just what Jules had suggested that you don't do. I thought that I had it because I had the tape recorder, and I listened to it, and the person says something, and I say to myself, "Oh my God, why didn't I follow up on that?" Well, it's because I
it's sitting
had the
right
tape
there.
recorder, and I
Yeah.
thought that I thought that I had it. If you're taking notes, it's such a pain in the ass to take notes that you want to get to the core of it. And so you tend to listen very hard so that you're getting to the core of the thing. Now everybody does it. Some people do it by, and they write great stories. They do it by tape recorder or video. For me, I need to take those notes because I won't follow up on the question.
I would agree with that. And I like to, there are a lot of transcription services out there and everything, but I always like to transcribe my own interviews because I find so many gems in there that I might have missed the first time around.
Hate it, but it's as a process. But then you find stuff, right? And
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, that question that's sitting there that you didn't ask, you're like, oh my God, how
Yeah.
did I? So I have a question from Valerie Stimac, which is a more practical side question for Katie. What's the current status of your budget for working with freelancers in broad strokes?
It's pretty good. Our print magazine is probably 75% freelance, and we pay about $1 a word, sometimes $1.50 if you're really a big deal. And web stories we have a lot of flexibility with, and we pay anywhere. I mean, the pay isn't great, but there's a lot of flexibility in terms of form and approach and word count and all that. And we generally pay between 350 and like 600 for web stories.
Okay, great. And this is from Aaron Steinser, and it's by way of sort of a pet peeve and wondering what you guys think about it. So maybe things will change in a post-COVID world, but what are your thoughts about tourists versus travelers going to a famous place just to post their photo on Instagram? Do they think it's the job of a writer to try to encourage people to experience the moment and not just snap the photo? It seems like a leading question, but what can you do with that, the way Instagram and other things are shifting the way we travel? Are there interesting ways of thinking about that, or not?
I actually have a feature story coming out in the July-August issue of Sierra about Instagram. That's very narrative, that kind of started with me hiking in the Sonoran Desert and seeing a Gila monster and trying to and not being able to snap a picture of it because I couldn't get to it in time, and like missing seeing it entirely, and just being like, God, I wish I had connected with the creature more than like worried about than I was worried about, you know, showing friends and total strangers that I'd connected with it. And so that kind of led to this whole story about like what Instagram has done to travel into public lands. And it's a bit of a think piece, but sorry, that's not really answering your question.
That's exactly answering the question. That sounds totally interesting, because I mean, it can give you a lot of pleasure, can it? Seeing beautiful things that other people have captured, and but then missing the moment with the lizard. So yeah.
But it's also a dreamy little micro bubble. So I mean, I don't think that writers should necessarily you know, say Instagram is bad or social media is bad or anything, but I love when people are willing to kind of be vulnerable and to you know, dig deep on that, and also to say when, you know, a lot of people from Instagram find their adventure communities in ways that they didn't used to be able to do because of the hashtags and everything. You know, there are some really popular groups for like queer and trans hikers and people, and you know, people find them not organically, but through Instagram. Like it's kind of incredible for you know, people with marginalized identities finding like-minded communities.
For sure.
So yeah, I think there's a lot to explore there.
I haven't read the Drag Queens in the Wilderness story yet, but I'm gonna get on that in the next couple of days.
It'll be online next week, I think. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sounds good. Well, Tim.
Well, a point. A lot of my work revolved around going to remote places, and some righteous criticism has been leveled at me in that I brought these places to the attention of the general public, and now you spoil them. Well, look,
the quandary I was talking about.
Let me put it this way. There are, every place you go that's remote, that seems to be untouched, is right in the crosshairs of some timbering company, some petrochemical company. They know where it is. They haven't gotten there yet. When I go there and I bring it to your attention and you go there, well, if they're going to develop this place that doesn't need to be developed, it used to be that you had to go out and make people aware of what it was. Now, the major vector in conserving a place really has to do with the number of people that walked the trail, that climbed the mountain, that descended the river. They're personally invested in it. And that is the most likely thing that is going to preserve our world.
We have an example in the next state to you. Crested Butte, Colorado, went for skiers and tourists instead of mining the hell out of the mountain on the local argument that the tourists go home. And it saved the mountain.
Yep. Yep. Same thing with the island of Bonaire in the ABC Islands. Bonaire decided that what it would do was save its reefs and make itself the greatest dive destination on Earth. And by God, they've just about succeeded in doing that.
Wow.
35 years now. 35
Wow.
years. They haven't touched their reefs. And if you go to the island of Curacao and try to dive on their reefs, what you see is the dead bones of dead reefs. You roll out of bed in Bonaire and you are out in the most beautiful diving conditions that you can imagine. So yeah, there's that. Thank you, Jules.
Thank you all. We're nearing the end of our time. I recommend to everyone to read these great writers and editors' work and dig into it. I'm really happy that Jules, that you asked such interesting questions and that you guys had such great answers to give. And thank you for all of the people attending and our prospective members. Think about joining. And former workshop members, nice to see you again. And this was above and beyond when I left the lights on my husband's car in the parking lot at Corte Madera. Tim also offered to give me a jump if he could. So that I felt like more than a writing instructor needs to do, and that seems to be the sort of person he is. And Katie, thank you for all of your insights and honesty and vulnerability. I like that you would repeatedly use that word in terms of trying to find the story and how people put themselves out there in ways that are interesting to read about. And anyway, I'm going on a little bit. 6 o'clock. Well done, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
all.
It was really a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you
Bye.
all. Good night.
Thank you guys for coming. It's been great.
I missed some of your questions in the chat. I'm sorry about that. We did as many as we could.